All right, ladies, again, thank you so much for your attendance today. I do appreciate your time. The presentation is going to be over the reading process and miscue analysis. Okay, so I'm going to go through the slides, and then in the sake of time, I'm just going to go through it and then take any questions at the end. Okay, so feel free to jot down any questions you may have, and then we can talk about it at the end of the presentation. So here we go, reading process and miscue analysis. So let's talk about what reading is, okay? Because when we ask this question to students, we get a lot of different responses, okay? We get reading is filling out workbooks. Reading is pronouncing the letters. Reading is, it's when you put sounds together, or reading is learning hard words. Reading is like, think, like, trying to understand the story, right? That's what reading is. Ms. Kane is joining us. All right, perfect. And or like, that's okay, Ms. Kane. Thank you for joining. I went ahead and started, but I just started, so you didn't miss anything. Okay.
We're just okay, no problem.
What reading is, and so we get a lot of different answers. Some kids will say, "Oh, it's when you find things out," So really, the way that they answer that question about what is reading, it reflects the kind of instruction that they've received. Okay. So if teachers, focus on just giving out worksheets, and to them reading is just filling out worksheets, okay, or pronouncing letters, right? It just depends on what kind of instruction they've received in the past. That's going to reflect their answers on when we ask that question. Now I said, what do you think about reading? Do you guys agree with what reading is? Like, do you have an idea what you think reading is? When we ask the question, what is reading? What do you think reading is? Anybody want to chime in on that? And if you don't really want to, you don't have to.
That's an interesting question to think about, like what reading is, because we just assume, right, that everyone just knows. But yeah, I guess at its most basic level, it's deciphering text or decoding words and making sense of them. At its most basic.
Yep. Yeah.
I would say, I think it's an opportunity to escape your own world and explore a different one.
Okay. Those are all very good answers, actually. But let me just tell you that there are actually two different schools of thought when it comes to reading. Okay. There are two different schools of thought here as far as the best way to teach reading. There's the skills approach to teaching reading, because, no one can really agree on what reading is, okay? Because there's just so many different things we can say about it. So there's the skills approach to teaching how to read, okay? Identifying words by learning the letter sound relationships. First, decoding words and then letter by letter, okay? So that's that skills approach. That's more of like phonics, okay? And then you have the comprehensive literacy approach, and that just means that reading is just constructing meaning. It's using everything you know in order to do that, okay? Using phonics, yes, you can use that phonics knowledge, but as part of effective reading strategies, not only to identify words, but to construct meaning, okay? So that's more of that comprehensive literacy approach. Basically, like when you're talking about comprehensive literacy approach, it involves reading like simple rhymes, poems, songs, stories, reading that to children and with children before you deal with the actual words and letter sound patterns. And it has to be done within the context of literature. Okay, that's that comprehensive literacy approach. Both are predictable texts like simple versions of folk tales, fairy tales, and then the less predictable ones like high quality literature that like you enjoy reading and rereading over and over again. And you can use that for instruction in reading strategies and skills. Okay, so basically that's the skills related knowledge can be taught, as we draw from the literature, from the text. Okay, so that's really the two different approaches when it comes to that. But really reading is just a very complicated process. It really is. I mean, researchers describe reading as a complex meaning making process that can never be exact. It begins with the reader's purpose for reading, and it's continuous. It is simultaneous, and it's transactive, and it all results in comprehension. At least that's what we hope. Okay. So when we say it's continuous, it means that the reader transacts with the author's printed words, And as they're doing that, they're adding to, or they're changing, or they're reorganizing their meanings while also expanding their knowledge. Okay, so it's continuous in that way. It's transactive because they integrate that new knowledge, the feelings, the ideas that they gain from the reading experience with their own beliefs and experiences and the knowledge of the world. Okay, so in that way, it's transactive. They also, make certain guesses about what to expect from the reading by using strategies like sampling, inferring, predicting, that kind of thing. It's also simultaneous because while readers are busy predicting and inferring and sampling and all those different things, they're also using language cueing systems. They use the most significant like syntactic, semantic, and graphophonic cues, okay, to predict and infer any kind of language cues that will be in the text. And we'll talk more about those three cueing systems in a second. But it's a process that's very much determined by what the reader's brain and emotions and beliefs bring to the reading. Okay, so there's also, that background information could be misinformation. It could be absence of information. The strategies that they use for processing text, their moods, their fears, their joys, like all of that is included in that process. So when we say it's psycholinguistic, it involves both the mind, okay, actively processing language, and it's sociolinguistic because it has multiple social factors that can affect how one reads and how much you understand, okay? So even word identification itself can be affected by these different factors because reading is a much, it's as much a brain to text process as a text to brain process, okay? So it's very, it goes back and forth. Okay, so let's talk about the three cueing systems. So in the process of constructing meaning, readers make use of these three different language cues that are within a text. So you have the graphophonic, syntactic, and semantic. So this is basically what they look like, these cueing systems. You have the graphophonic, that's your visual. This graphophonic is basically like cues that you get from the letters and the letter patterns, and they combine with our own knowledge of letter sound patterns, like phonics, to identify those words, okay? And then you have the syntactic cueing system. And this is, we're looking at the structure of language when we look at these cueing systems, like the word order. So for example, if you said the man chased the dog, that's not the same as saying that the dog chased the man, right? So the way these words are ordered is going to affect what we understand. Also, it includes function words like articles like a, and, the. It also includes determiners like these, that, those, his, her, all of these things, all these function words, including prepositions and helping verbs and conjunctions, like all of that makes up the structure of language. And so then we ask, hey, does that word sound like the right word? So we're really thinking about the sound. And we also have to take into account like the word ending. So all that, is the structure of language. So that is the syntactic cueing system. Let me go to the next one. So so this is syntactic. Again, just the structure of language. And then of course, a semantic cueing system, that's at the heart of language, right? Because it has to do with meaning cues from each sentence, and meaning gained that from the actual overall text as a whole. So it includes words and phrases and how they change over time. It also includes dictionary definitions and what kinds of definitions words or phrases have in different contexts. So it really has to do a lot with context. Let me go back to this picture here. So meaning cueing system, does it make sense? That's what we're asking ourselves, does it make sense? We use all of these things. We use does the story make sense? We use any prior knowledge to bring the meaning, to make meaning. We use the actual text itself, any pictures, all of that is involved in meaning making as we read, okay? So knowing that, reading is such a complex, it's very, very complex, the reading process is just very complex. There's a lot going on, okay? And conventional standardized tests, they really cannot accurately measure reading ability. They're measuring something, but perhaps maybe test taking strategies, but definitely not reading ability, okay, given all these complexities. So then we asked, well, how do we assess reading? What's the best way? What's the best way to do it? Now, Kenneth Goodman, he formulated a theory, okay, of the reading process. This is back in the 1960s. He first drew upon the reader's miscues, and we'll talk about what a miscue is here in just a second. And basically, he analyzes the miscues of readers, and they've done hundreds of research on this, and it's proven to be pretty fruitful, okay, as far as trying to figure out what strategies, what are they doing when they're reading exactly, okay? So let's talk about a miscue. A miscue is basically, it's applied to reading. So as applied to reading, a miscue is whatever the reader says out loud or thinks silently instead of what is actually written on the page. Okay, so it's like an observed response that differs from the expected response that's cued from the actual words on the text. And basically it just kind of gives us a window on the reading process. Okay, kind of gives us an idea of what students are doing as they're reading. So let's talk about different types of miscues, because you have miscues of good readers and you have miscues of poor readers. So now good readers, they do make fewer miscues, okay, than less proficient readers, but they actually make higher miscues involving pronouns and simple function words, the so-called basic sight words, okay? This occurs because they're reading to construct meaning rather than trying to identify every single word. So these are considered acceptable or high quality miscues because they do not change the meaning of the sentence. The meaning stays intact. So an example here, of course, is she made her own paints from the roots, and the miscue was she made her own paints from roots. So the function word the was omitted, but it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, and the grammar stays intact, okay? So the meaning is preserved. Now, good readers, they are effective readers, okay? They're effective readers because they succeed in constructing meaning from text from which they have adequate background knowledge and language. And such readers are also efficient too, because they can understand what they read without struggling again and again to try to sound out every single word. Okay, especially if it's not very crucial to the text. And then you don't have to really worry about correcting the miscue because, okay, if I skip the word the, that's, it doesn't change anything. I still get the meaning. So they're also proficient when they can be both like effective and efficient. If they're both effective and efficient, they make them proficient readers, okay? Now let's talk about the miscues of poor readers. Poor readers make different types of miscues. Oops, let me go back. So, the less proficient readers, they make miscues on like basic sight words. The miscues may sometimes reflect the fact that the reader is not really succeeding at constructing meaning. Perhaps they're, because they think that, reading is more of a matter of identifying words correctly. All right, so an example here is the girls at the village did not go to school, for the people thought that school was not important for girls as it was for boys. The miscue, the way this student read it was the girls of the Benjel did not go to school, for the people thought that school was not apprentice for girls as to was for boys. Okay, so yes, the miscues, they may have some of the letters and the common words in the text, they may kind of look similar in length and all that, but good grammar or good sense is not preserved. Okay, so you would not understand. It doesn't make sense. Meaning is not preserved. So this is what the miscues, this is what a miscue would look like if you were doing an analysis, okay? So we take the text, we create a text of about 300 words, a story we find, and then we give the story for the reader to read out loud. We create what we call a transcript. And so, it's the same text, but we just, create it so that there's space in here, and then we can kind of jot down any errors or miscues that were made as the student was reading out loud. We also number each line of text, and then we mark it. Okay, we mark it as we go. Now, there are different types of markings. You could, some miscues involve repetition of the word. Sometimes they skip altogether, they skip a word, or they'll replace a word, which is what you're seeing here. They'll replace words with other words, or they'll just, like this one here, they replace to with at. And so this is what a miscue analysis would look like. This is what it would look like if we were actually doing this with a student. And so once we analyze this, right, we get a picture of, well, okay, this student is doing, let's see what we can learn from that. Let's see what we learn from actually analyzing that miscue. So they, you know, they don't really actually tell us exactly what the reader was thinking or trying to do when he or she made the miscue. But it requires us to kind of draw inferences, right, from what the miscues and miscue patterns tell us. We have to infer. It requires us to kind of, you know, we have to understand the reading process, and you know, we have to have the ability to apply that knowledge and understanding so we can make, you know, inferences like this. We have to look for and we have to see those patterns and to draw those conclusions. Okay, so that can help us guide our instruction. Okay, so it may show, basically it could show patterns that reflect a reader's lack of knowledge of a word or maybe a concept. They may also reflect other positive strategies as well. Okay, it can have positive strategy. It'll show like, hey, this reader is using good strategies such as prediction, or you know, they have a good you know, background knowledge. They have a good background knowledge, or they're using good strategies such as constructing meaning, like monitoring comprehension, fixing, you know, they're fixing what they read, and then the readers, when the reader's reading when the meaning or grammar is wrong, so they can go back and say, oh wait, that didn't sound right, let me go back and read that again, right? So those are all strategies that you can see are being used by looking at the analysis. So most readers, especially those that are very effective at constructing meaning, they'll predict or think ahead as they read, okay? And this can cause them to make miscues. They'll skip words, right? Because they're already predicting what's gonna come. And they'll sometimes have many miscues because of that. But as long as they fit within the text and the meaning is preserved, then it's considered a high quality miscue. So miscues suggesting non-proficient reading, they also do not tell the whole story, okay? So we need to really weigh the frequency of such miscues against the frequency of miscues that do use good reading strategies. It really depends upon the patterns of those miscues, okay? And their relative frequency. So they may suggest, you know, that a reader is effective but not very efficient, or that a reader is neither efficient nor effective, okay? So once the actual analysis is done, we do what we call a retrospective analysis. So we invite the reader to listen to the recording of the reading, of themselves reading, and then we can kind of, you know, speculate as to why he or she made certain miscues, try to understand what was going on, right? And this is also a teaching and learning procedure that we can do after reading. That's why it's called a retrospective. And it also enables us to help readers develop effective and efficient strategies. So we can kind of see, you know, the strategies they're using, where they're lacking, then we can talk about, okay, let's try using this instead. Let's try, you know, predicting ahead, or, you know, different strategies that we can talk about. So, and it makes it more objective, right? The actual analysis, it makes it more objective, you know, because we can do it immediately after the recording. So let's see here. So basically, yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, what it does, this RMA is what we call it, a retrospective miscue analysis. It just enables us to help readers develop those effective and efficient strategies for reading, okay? So some effective strategies, let's talk about that real quick. And we're almost done, actually. So, you know, some you could have them listen to books on tape, because what that does is it helps them internalize not only words, but the letter sound patterns. Okay, that's one strategy you can use. There's also the shared reading experiences. It happens between the student and the teacher, or you can do it as a group of students reading together. And it helps the readers learn about the various aspects of language, especially written language. So the text must be large enough for everyone to see. And, you know, as they're listening to you read or others read, they can kind of learn, you know, those intonations and those different parts of language, okay? Another one is predicting a logical sequence of events or actions. What do you think might happen in this story and why? What do you think might happen next and why, right? And we can do that by looking at text features, you know, pictures, maybe even just the title, okay? And that can help us predict. Also, another strategy is monitoring comprehension and appropriate word identification. So does that sound like language as you're reading? You know, having them monitor their own comprehension. Does that sound like language? Does that make sense? right? Also using the visual aspects of words and letter knowledge to check initial identification of words. So for example, does that word look like cake? Does it sound like lake? You know, that kind of thing. Also reprocessing the text, just rereading to clarify any meaning, you know, or any words that you may not understand. Okay. And then also these strategies and other strategies that can all be done during a shared reading experience. Okay. It can all be done during that. We don't need to put special time aside for this kind of, it can be addressed during a shared reading experience. So it doesn't have to take a whole lot of time. So other considerations, that language is not the only way humans construct meaning. Different cultural groups have different ways of meaning making. Art, music, and movement can be considered in a modern classroom as a way to create meaning, okay? When we're looking at literacy as multiple literacies, it can also be thought of as a particular set of social practices that a particular set of people value. Okay. Also, instead of thinking of literacy as something that you either have or don't have, we can think about it as a social practice, For example, let me see if I have this. Oh no, I don't have it in here. But one thing that that I didn't include in here is that there was a study that showed that art mixing it with literacy can really help bilingual children because it kind of helps them name their world and to grasp, you know, their own personal backgrounds. It just provides more of a concrete way to embrace language and discuss, you know, language, their imaginations, right? So special ELL students, they struggle with language. So in order to construct meaning, we can also look at maybe combining the two, art and literacy, just to kind of engage them, okay? And also, another thing we can do, I don't know why I didn't put it in here, but we as teachers, the one thing that we can do that can have a really big impact is to allow students to do a lot more reading. Now that's something that I noticed that our students don't get to do a whole lot of reading, okay? Not even a reading class. I mean, like, you know, we need to expand their vocabulary. So word consciousness is so important. We need to really work on word consciousness with our students. And the way that they become word conscious is by just having a lot of exposure to words. And that happens through reading text that's rich in words, right? And new words. Because reading is like the principal language experience. That's how you enlarge your vocabulary. Those people that read more know more and have a larger vocabulary. So that's the single most important thing that we can do as teachers is just, you know, increase the amount of reading that our students do. But that is it, you guys. Thank you for spending your valuable time with me today. Now, I do hope that, you know, you came away with something useful. I will take any questions or any comments you have at this time.
Great job. Thanks, lady.
Very good, guys. So anything else you want to add or say, or no questions?
I was just giggling at myself for a lot of it because I do a lot of the miscues myself.
You do miscue analysis?
I do a lot of miscues.
Wonderful. That's great. Have you ever heard of a miscue analysis, Miss Foley? Or you heard the reading process explained this way?
Nope.
Right. I know it's very complicated, and it's just another approach to you know, trying to assess reading, because you know, it's just the way we do it now. I don't think it really shows a true representation of what our kids are able to do, you know. So thank you for your feedback, and you know, if you have any questions, let me know. You know, if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, I have it, and I also have the sources you know, for that. So thank you for your time, ladies. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.